Sheikh Amir Al-Darzi and Isha Mera looked like the perfect couple, a royal groom from Dubai and a radiant Indian bride whose wedding captivated two nations. But beneath the gold, luxury, and glamour of their fairy tale marriage, something sinister was waiting to surface. Within a week of saying, "I do," the dream turned into horror on a private island where no one could hear Isha's screams. What began as love ended in blood, and the world would soon discover the dark truth hidden behind the Al-Darzi name. The royal wedding of Sheikh Amir Al-Darzi and Isha Mera was more than just a celebration. It was an international spectacle. Every major newspaper in Dubai and Mumbai ran the same headline: "The Desert Prince marries the Indian beauty." The ceremony was held at one of Dubai's grandest palaces, a marble fortress surrounded by fountains that danced under golden lights. Thousands of roses were imported from India, and the wedding gown alone was rumored to cost more than a Rolls-Royce. The air was filled with music, perfume, and the weight of perfection. To the guests, it looked like the union of two hearts and two nations, destined for greatness. But beneath the shimmering surface, something darker lingered, unseen and silent. Isha Mera came from a respected family in Mumbai. She was well-educated, gentle, and curious about the world. She had always dreamed of finding love beyond borders. When she met Amir Al-Darzi at a charity gala in Delhi, she was captivated by his confidence. He spoke of change, of bridging cultures, of giving back to the world. For her, he represented everything extraordinary: wealth, influence, and purpose. Their courtship was brief but intense. Within months, she was flying to Dubai to meet his family. Unaware of the secrets buried deep within their mansion, Amir was the only son of Sheikh Hassan Al-Darzi, one of the Emirates' most powerful business magnates. From childhood, Amir had lived under immense pressure to be perfect, to control, to dominate, to never fail. His charm was magnetic, but those closest to him knew that his temper could erupt like a desert storm. There had been whispers of broken engagements, rumors of women who disappeared quietly after being seen with him. Yet none of that reached Isha. The Al-Darzi name was too influential for scandal to survive for long. On their wedding day, Isha walked through the palace halls in a golden lehenga that shimmered under the chandelier lights. Every step she took was captured by cameras, every smile analyzed by the media. She seemed radiant, glowing with hope. Amir stood beside her, tall and composed, a prince in every sense. He looked at her with an intensity that made the guests sigh with admiration, though no one could see the unease that flickered in her eyes when his grip tightened around her hand. The ceremony ended with grandeur. Fireworks painted the night sky in shades of red and gold as the couple made their first public appearance as husband and wife. Dignitaries, royalty, and celebrities showered them with blessings. It was perfection personified. Yet, when the lights dimmed and the cameras turned off, Amir's demeanor changed. His voice grew cold, his movements mechanical. He dismissed the servants and closed the doors behind them. To Isha, the silence felt heavier than gold. Later that night, Amir's cousin Karim found him standing alone in the courtyard, staring into the distance. The champagne glass in his hand trembled slightly. Karim had seen that look before, something dangerous, something that did not belong in the face of a man who had just married. He said nothing, only watched as Amir disappeared into the palace shadows. As for Isha, she sat by the window in her bridal suite, still wearing her wedding dress. She looked down at the city lights of Dubai stretching endlessly below, her reflection staring back at her. For the first time since she met Amir, she felt a quiet chill in her chest. It wasn't fear yet, but it was something close. That by morning, the palace was alive again with celebration. The newlyweds were to leave for their honeymoon that afternoon, a private island owned by the Al-Darzi family. The media called it the trip of a lifetime, a royal escape. Isha smiled for the cameras as she boarded Amir's private jet, her henna-stained hands waving gracefully. But deep inside, she carried an unease she couldn't name. As the jet soared above the glittering Persian Gulf, Isha closed her eyes and tried to convince herself it was nothing. She told herself that the strange silence, the sudden mood changes, the faint bruises of control she had started to notice, none of it meant danger. She believed love could fix anything. But love, as she was about to learn, was not what awaited her on that island. The private island that awaited Sheikh Amir Al-Darzi and Isha Mera was breathtaking. A crescent of white sand surrounded by turquoise water, untouched by the world. The Aldartsi family had owned it for decades, using it as a retreat where no journalists, paparazzi, or unwanted visitors could reach. The villa stood alone at the heart of the island, built in pale stone, its glass walls opening to the sea. When Isha stepped onto the wooden dock, she was struck by how silent everything was. The air smelled of salt and sun, but something about the quiet felt unnatural, almost staged. Karim Aldartsi was already there to welcome them. He managed everything: food, security, and communication with the mainland. He greeted Isha politely, but avoided her eyes. His expression carried an unease that didn't fit the occasion. Amir was in a good mood that day, almost too good. He led Isha through the villa, showing her the infinity pool that merged into the horizon, the private cinema, the marble terrace where they could dine under the stars. It looked like paradise crafted by human hands. And yet, there was no laughter, no warmth, only the sound of waves and distant gulls that in the beginning. Isha tried to settle into the rhythm of island life. She woke early to watch the sunrise, walked barefoot along the beach, and collected small shells to send home. Amir worked in his study for hours, talking on the phone in hushed tones. She rarely knew what he was discussing, and when she asked, he brushed it off as business. She had thought their honeymoon would be filled with affection, but Amir seemed distracted, detached, and sometimes strangely irritated by small things: her humming, her reading, even her phone calls with her parents. After a few days, Isha began noticing things that didn't make sense. She found a locked drawer in Amir's study filled with files marked in Arabic, each labeled with dates and women's names she didn't recognize. Late at night, she heard him speaking to someone on the phone in a tone filled with anger. When she tried to listen, he shut the door sharply. The staff, she realized, were gone. Karim told her that Amir wanted privacy, that no one else was allowed on the island during their stay. That explanation left her uneasy. It meant she was entirely alone with her husband, surrounded by miles of ocean. One afternoon, while cleaning the mirror in their bedroom, Isha noticed a faint glimmer of light behind the glass. She leaned closer and realized it wasn't just a reflection, it was the lens of a small hidden camera. Her heart raced. She checked the other rooms and found two more, one in the living room, another near the outdoor shower. It felt like the walls were watching her. She wanted to confront Amir, but fear held her back. That night, when Karim came to serve dinner, she gave him a questioning look, silently pleading for an explanation. He looked away, his jaw tight, his hands trembling slightly as he poured water. That silence said more than words ever could. As the days passed, the weather began to change. A storm approached from the horizon, black clouds swallowing the sun. The ocean turned rough, and the wind howled through the palm trees. The power flickered on and off until the villa was plunged into darkness. Isha heard shouting from Amir's study, the crash of glass, the sound of furniture being thrown. When she approached the door, she heard him muttering angrily to himself, as if arguing with someone who wasn't there. By the time the storm subsided, the island was a mess. Broken glass lay on the floor, and Amir's hand was bleeding. He dismissed it as nothing, but his eyes had changed. They were colder, distant, the eyes of a man no longer pretending. That night, Isha couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, listening to the wind fade into silence. The island that had once looked like paradise now felt like a golden cage. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound a warning. The next morning, Amir was calm again, almost too calm. He brought her breakfast, smiled, and spoke of taking a boat ride to another part of the island. But something inside her whispered not to go. She didn't know it yet, but her instincts were right. This island wasn't meant for romance. It was a stage for something far more sinister, something that had already begun the moment she stepped foot on its perfect, empty shore. 2 days after the storm, a distress call reached Dubai authorities. Karim Aldartsi's trembling voice reported that Isha Mera, the new bride of Sheikh Amir Aldartsi, had gone missing on the private island. His words were broken and scattered, claiming that she had wandered near the cliffs after sunset and never returned. Within hours, the call made its way to the Dubai police headquarters, where Detective Omar Fayed, a seasoned investigator known for his precision, was assigned to the case. What was initially presented as a tragic accident began to unfold into something far more unsettling. When Detective Omar arrived on the island, the scene was eerily calm. The sun shone brightly, waves rolled gently, and the villa stood untouched as though nothing had happened. Emir greeted him at the dock, dressed in a white shirt, his eyes hidden behind dark glasses. His voice was steady, his story rehearsed. He claimed that Isha had been feeling restless and wanted to take a walk along the coastline before dinner. When she didn't return, he had searched the island all night. Karim confirmed the same story, though his tone lacked conviction. Omar began his inspection immediately. Isha's clothes were neatly folded in her closet, her jewelry laid out on the dresser, her phone and passport locked inside a drawer. It didn't look like the belongings of someone planning to leave or someone who had vanished by accident. The bed was made perfectly, and the villa was spotless, too spotless for a place recently shaken by tragedy. What caught Omar's attention most was the faint metallic scent near the staircase, subtle, but unmistakable. Blood. Emir brushed off the observation, saying a staff member had injured himself months earlier. But there was no staff left on the island, and Karim's silence only deepened the suspicion. The detective examined the security system next. Every camera was operational, yet the footage from the night of Isha's disappearance was missing. The files had been deleted manually, hours before the storm. Emir explained that lightning must have damaged the system, but Omar wasn't convinced. He had investigated enough powerful men to recognize when truth was being replaced with convenience. As evening fell, Omar walked the perimeter of the villa. The sand was smooth, almost unnaturally even, as though recently brushed. Near the western cliffs, he found fresh disturbances in the soil, uneven patches, as if something heavy had been dragged. When he asked Karim about it, the man avoided his eyes and muttered that the storm had caused minor erosion. The detective noted the area but said nothing. That night, Emir hosted a dinner for the investigation team, insisting on his innocence. He appeared calm, occasionally smiling, even offering to help with the search. But his hands shook slightly as he poured his drink. His behavior was strange, not of a grieving husband, but of a man performing grief. Karim barely spoke, his eyes fixed on his plate, sweat beading on his forehead. The silence between the two cousins was louder than the wind outside. Over the next 2 days, divers searched the coastline, while drones scanned the cliffs. No trace of Isha was found. The official report began forming the shape of an accident, but Omar refused to close the case. Something didn't fit. The missing footage, the faint blood, the erased digital records, and Emir's unreadable calm. Then came the first real clue. A local fisherman, who supplied the island before the couple arrived, told authorities that he had seen the island's boat being used during the storm, at a time when no one should have been at sea. He described 2 figures moving in the rain, carrying something wrapped in white. The boat had returned before dawn, its hull later scrubbed clean. When Omar inspected it, he found faint traces of fabric fibers near the edge, traces that matched Isha's wedding attire. Why now? Karim's nerves were unraveling. He avoided Emir, drank constantly, and stared blankly into the distance. When Omar approached him privately, he hesitated but said nothing. His loyalty to the Al-Dartsi name was fighting against the weight of guilt that was slowly crushing him. The island that once seemed serene now felt heavy with secrets. The wind carried a sense of something unfinished, something buried beneath its beauty. As Omar prepared to return to Dubai for further analysis, he looked back at the cliffs. The waves crashed violently against the rocks, and for a fleeting moment, he thought he saw something, a shimmer of white beneath the waterline. Gone as quickly as it appeared, he knew then that Isha Mera had not simply vanished. She had been silenced, and whoever was responsible was standing only a few feet away, smiling, waiting for the world to believe a lie. Karim Al-Dartsi hadn't slept for nights. The silence of the island had become unbearable, filled with echoes of things he could no longer ignore. Every time the wind brushed against the villa's windows, he flinched, haunted by the memory of that stormy night. The weight of guilt pressed heavily on his chest, suffocating him slowly. He replayed the events in his mind over and over, the sound of Emir's voice, the crash of glass, the final moments that ended everything. He had buried the truth under sand and silence, but the truth refused to stay buried. Detective Omar's investigation had grown relentless. He returned to the island days later with new evidence, fibers, traces of blood, and inconsistencies in Amir's timeline. Omar didn't confront anyone directly. Instead, he let the pressure simmer. He watched, observed, and waited. And it worked. Kareem began to crack. He was visibly pale, his hands trembled when he spoke, and his eyes avoided Amir's every time their paths crossed. Amir noticed the change too. He reminded Kareem of loyalty, of family, of the consequences of betrayal. But the fear inside Kareem had reached a breaking point stronger than his devotion to blood. Late one night, Kareem sat on the villa's terrace, staring at the dark sea. The air was thick and still, and he could almost hear Isha's laughter from the first day she arrived, the way she had smiled at the ocean as if she belonged there. He took out his phone, scrolled through his recordings, and hesitated on one file, a video he had secretly taken during the night of the storm. It was short, blurry, but it captured enough to destroy everything. Amir's voice, his rage, his confession shouted into the chaos. Kareem had kept it as insurance, something to protect himself in case the worst happened. Now it was the only thing keeping his conscience alive. The next morning, he called Detective Omar in secret. His voice was low, breaking as he spoke. He said he couldn't live with it anymore. He told the detective that Isha's death wasn't an accident, that she had discovered something about Amir she was never supposed to know. She had found surveillance footage, hidden files, and evidence of Amir's violent past, videos that showed women before her, broken by his temper. When she demanded to return to India, Amir panicked. He accused her of betrayal, convinced she would expose him to the world. According to Kareem, the confrontation happened during the storm. The wind howled through the villa as Amir shouted, pacing like a madman. Isha tried to calm him, but he struck her across the face. When she fell, he didn't stop. He hit her again and again, his rage blind and unstoppable. Kareem had stood frozen at the doorway, watching as Isha's body went still. When Amir realized what he'd done, he turned to Kareem, eyes wild, ordering him to help clean everything. They wrapped her in a silk sheet, the same one from their wedding night, and carried her out into the storm. The rain poured down as they buried her near the cliffs, the waves crashing against the rocks below. When the deed was done, Amir forced Kareem to delete the camera footage and burn Isha's belongings. But Kareem had disobeyed one order. He had kept that recording on his hidden backup drive. It wasn't much, but it was proof, a small window into the horror that had unfolded inside that villa. Omar listened carefully, every word burning into his mind. He told Kareem to stay calm and promise protection, but the damage was already done. Amir had noticed the shift in his cousin's behavior and began to suspect betrayal. That night, as the island was wrapped in stillness, Kareem felt the tension rise again. The same heaviness that had filled the air before Isha's death now pressed against the walls. He locked himself inside his room, clutching his phone, terrified that Amir would come for him next. He stared at the waves through the window, knowing that before the sun rose, the truth would finally surface. He had carried guilt like a second skin, and now, he was ready to tear it off, even if it meant destroying the man he had once sworn to protect. When the first light of dawn touched the island, Detective Omar arrived with a full team. Kareem met them at the dock, pale and shaking, holding his phone as if it were the only thing keeping him alive. He handed it over without a word. The recording was played on-site, the sound of thunder and rain mixing with Amir's furious voice. There was no denying it anymore. The storm had ended that night, but its echoes were about to tear everything apart. Detective Omar Fayed stood on the edge of the cliff, the early morning wind whipping through his coat. Below him, waves crashed violently against the rocks, as if nature itself was trying to reveal what had been hidden beneath its surface. The excavation team worked silently behind him, their shovels cutting through the wet sand. It didn't take long before one of them called out. Something white had emerged, a corner of silk, soaked and torn. The digging grew faster, more frantic, until the outline of a human body came into view. Wrapped in what was once a beautiful bridal sheet lay the remains of Isha Mehra. Her wedding bangles still clung to her wrist, faintly glinting in the sunlight. The dream that had begun in gold and celebration had ended in the cold grip of the earth. Forensic experts moved carefully, documenting every detail. The autopsy later confirmed what Omar already suspected. Isha had died from multiple blunt force injuries and strangulation. Her death was not an accident, not a fall, but a deliberate act of rage. The evidence Kareem had provided, the video recording from that night, was undeniable. The storm, the shouting, the sounds of struggle, and Amir's voice trembling with fury, all painted a chilling picture of what had happened on that island. When confronted, Amir denied everything. He claimed Kareem had doctored the footage, that jealousy and greed had driven his cousin to betray him. His composure, however, began to crumble the moment Omar presented the physical evidence. The matching fibers from Isha's clothing found on the villa's floor, the deleted surveillance data recovered by the cyber team, and the traces of Isha's DNA beneath Amir's fingernails. There was no longer any room for lies. The man who had once stood as a symbol of elegance and control now sat hunched in silence, his hands trembling, his eyes dark and distant. The arrest of Sheikh Amir al-Dartsi sent shockwaves across Dubai. The news broke instantly, spreading from local headlines to international outlets. Cameras gathered outside the police headquarters as the son of one of the most powerful families in the Emirates was brought in, his face hidden behind dark glasses, his once proud stride replaced by defeat. The al-Dartsi family pulled every string they could to suppress the scandal, offering settlements, demanding silence, and using influence to delay proceedings. But the evidence was too strong, the story too large to bury. For once, wealth could not buy innocence. In court, the truth played out in haunting detail. Kareem testified, his voice breaking as he described the night of the storm. He spoke of Isha's fear, of Amir's uncontrollable rage, and of the silence that followed after she stopped moving. The courtroom fell still as the video played, every word echoing through the chamber. Amir's defense crumbled under the weight of his own voice. After weeks of proceedings, the verdict came, guilty of murder in the first degree. Amir was sentenced to life imprisonment in a high-security facility outside Dubai. Kareem received a reduced sentence for his cooperation. His face hollow with regret as he was taken away, the al-Dartsi family withdrew from the public eye. Their vast empire continued, but their name was forever stained by what had happened on that island. Reporters called it the desert tragedy, a story that blurred the line between love and power, devotion and control. Isha's body was returned to India under heavy media coverage. Her funeral was quiet, attended by family, friends, and hundreds of strangers who had followed her story. As her coffin was lowered into the ground, white flowers covered the grave, a small photograph of her smiling face placed at the headstone. Nadia Rahman, her best friend, stood in silence, knowing that the girl, who once dreamed of a life filled with love, had become the face of a nightmare that the world would never forget. Detective Omar watched the story fade from the headlines over the following months, replaced by newer scandals. But he never forgot the island, nor the quiet sadness in Isha's last photographs. Sometimes he would replay the video evidence in his mind, the laughter at the wedding, the silence in the villa, the storm that ended everything. The island itself was abandoned. The villa was locked, its windows sealed, its grounds overgrown with weeds. Locals began to call it the bride's shore, claiming that at night, faint sobs could be heard carried by the sea breeze. No one dared to stay after sunset. It became a symbol of tragedy, a warning that behind the glitter of wealth and luxury, darkness could thrive unnoticed. In the end, the perfect marriage that had united two worlds ended as a haunting reminder of what power and obsession can destroy. And as the waves continued to crash against the cliffs, the island kept its final secret, the echo of a bride who came to paradise and never left.